Okay guys, girls, we are back with another Warhammer 40k video. By Remembrancer, this time we're gonna learn about Primarch Magnus the Red. I believe he is Thousand Suns. If you guys played Space Marine 2, I think they're like the main enemies. And Space Marine 1 for that fact, I think. You know how usually in the intros I do something, tell you about what happened? Honestly, these couple days I wasn't gaming at all. I wasn't, I was just working around the house doing stuff. So I have nothing really to show you. So yeah, without further ado, let's begin.
Without the light of chaos, the universe
Also, I have a burn energy drink.
would stagnate and collapse. Only through this struggle can any advancement occur.
Magnus the Red.
The Primarchs of his Imperium are among the strongest beings in the galaxy. Gifted power beyond the comprehension of mere mortals, the sons of the Emperor would lead their armies at the vanguard of battle. Yet each Primarch would strive to push the limits of their strength, whether in martial prowess, artifice, or psychic potential. For today, we shall elucidate a Primarch, unequaled in his mastery of the warp, blinded by the allure of fell knowledge. The Primarch of the 15th Legion, Magnus the Red.
So from what I understand, well, that he's just simply, to put it, a bookworm.
The young son of the Emperor would be unique among his brethren in many ways. The only Primarch to remember the origin of his creation.
Whoa. No.
The psychic power of the Crimson Child would be potent from the start. Within his gestation pod, inside the gene labs of Terra, the child would utilize his innate psychic abilities to commune with the master of mankind. Spirited to the colony world of Prospero during the scattering of the Primarchs, the son of the Emperor would emerge into a world steeped in the mystical arts of sorcery. The populace had been shunned by humanity for its manipulations of the immaterial realm since the days of the Dark Age of technology, and in their isolation, they would work tirelessly to understand the nuances of the warp.
He was basically sent to a Harry Potter world. I still can't get over the fact that he knew about the Emperor from the start. That's like insane.
Plagued by beings known as the Psychnuin, the power emanating from the psyches of the planet would draw the foul warp-spawned insectoid creatures to prey on the minds of the weak.
Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
The sorcerers would band together to stave off the incursions of the creatures, and within their bastions, study means to hone their psychic might. Alike to a comet, the Primarch's gestation pod would plunge through Prospero's orbit and crash into the central plaza of the world's capital, Tizca. Among the sorcerers of the planet, a lone man would step forth to investigate the capsule. Amon, a senior member of the Tizcan commune, would find a child within and raise the young boy as both father and tutor. The boy would quickly mature and demonstrate an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. The kind mentor and powerful psyker of Prospero would teach the son of the Emperor every art in the Arcanum within his understanding. Within years, Amon's mastery of the ether would be surpassed by his adopted child, as Magnus read ancient tomes, compendiums, and scraps of text within the City of Light's librarium.
So, again, this seems like so different from like Angron and Mortarion, who basically suffered. He was just like, yeah, there's a lot of books you can learn. I guess he fought off those instinct creatures, but that seems like a easy come up.
No longer the most revered sorcerer of Prospero, Amon would with pride relinquish his mentorship of the boy and assume the mantle of student to his own son.
Oh shit. That's so cool.
None had ever seen a being capable of the wonders Magnus could conjure, and with time, the Master of the Warp would rally the people of Prospero to eradicate the Psychnuin from their world. Entire cities of Prospero had been infested with the creatures of the Warp and claimed untold souls from their harvest.
Are these like just regular creatures from the warp, or they're like also a part of some well, chaos god? Because Nurgle has insects, but this doesn't seem like Nurgle infested ones.
With Magnus's ascension as the ruler of Prospero by dint of his power, the Crimson King would lead his unified band of sorcerers to cleanse their once noble bulwarks. Purging the beings from Prospero, Magnus would see to the reconstruction of the city of Tizca, with knowledge gleaned from the reclaimed city's long-dormant repositories of knowledge and history. The City of Light would transform into a paradise. Marble and glass pyramids would jut into the heavens as the citizenry studied Arcanum within the tranquil parks and boulevards of Tizca.
I actually did not expect Magnus to completely like restore the city. I always thought like in my head, you know, he would just want to get all the lost knowledge. I wouldn't think that he would want to restore the city, you know? He doesn't strike me as that type of guy.
Enraptured with bliss and safety, the Prosperans would flourish with the peace brought by their new monarch. Yet the Crimson King would not be satisfied with the lot of his people. Seeking to further master and explore the power of the so-called Great Ocean, Magnus would see to the construction of a vast great library within the heart of Tizca, for the scholars of Prospero to further probe their understanding of the Immaterium. Despite his once mentor Ammon warning the Crimson King against delving too deep into the nadir of the Great Ocean, Magnus would journey further into its tides. Such acts of psychic power would emanate through the galaxy and quickly draw the attention of the Master of Mankind to its origins. During 840.M30, the Emperor of Mankind would descend unto the precincts of Tizca. The two had conversed for years as the Master of Mankind sought to reunite with his prodigal son, and upon the Emperor's reunion with his child, he would embrace him. Accompanying his father for
Okay, so far is like... Again, it's just so interesting because, you know, we know that he's gonna be corrupted by chaos. And, you know, it just... It's always like, to me, it's the most interesting part. What happened to them, you know? Because as far as now, he basically somehow managed to defeat those insect monsters. He also brought peace to the world. And he also seeks to learn about warp more. That's as far as now, I think he's perfectly clear from everything, you know? He's not involved with chaos at all. It's just, you know, it's interesting.
solar decades, Magnus would join the Emperor in his traversal and study of the warp. Yet the Master of Mankind would warn Magnus that even though they were among the most psychically powerful beings in the galaxy, the machinations of the warp were not to be overindulged. For dangers lurked within the depths of the great ocean, to which no man, no matter his strength or wisdom, would be immune to its malevolent influence.
Okay, so Emperor basically, he's also the only Primarch, I guess, who was warned by the Emperor to not venture too deep.
Installed as the leader of the 15th Legion, the Thousand Sons, Magnus's kin would follow in their primal...
Wait, just like that? There was nothing like... He just accepted his legion? He just welcomed the Emperor? Just like... Nothing like... You know, all Primarchs go through some sort of challenge. They have some disagreements with Emperor. Magnus just accepted everything so fast. That's...
image
okay.
as the most gifted psychers of the Legiones Astartes. Yet their gifts would not be without cost, as the 15th Legion had been ravaged by a warp-borne mutation known as the Flesh Change.
What is that?
Mutation and organ rejection would be rampant within the Legion as a direct result of their psychic affinity, to which their numbers had dwindled to 1,000 souls. The Emperor had named them to honor those who had survived the decline of their numbers and remained resolute and stalwart in the face of their dire circumstance. Many within the Imperium would advocate for the euthanizing of its remaining Astartes to prevent further unavoidable mutations, but Magnus would plead to the Emperor to allow the Crimson King to seek a cure for their ailment.
I mean, come on, dude. Yeah, I see it. Magnus is smart. I think, you know, given some time, maybe he could have found the cure.
Agreeing to his request, the Emperor would allow the Crimson King several decades to find the cure.
Oh, okay. Emperor did let
For
him.
his gene sons. In secret, Magnus would naively consort with the entities within the Great Ocean and be offered a balm for his men, sacrificing his eye in the bargain for his legion's.
I always wanted to say earlier, why does he always, in every picture we see of Magnus, he only has one eye? Okay, so he basically sold his eye for a cure.
Survival. Magnus would be manipulated by the schemer of the warp, Tzeentch. Believing himself to have cleansed the flesh change from his legion, Magnus had bought only a temporary reprieve for his 1,000 sons. His arrogance damning his legion to endure future hardships, the Crimson King and the 1,000 sons would rejoin the Great Crusade 100 years after the Emperor's arrival to Tisca. For the Imperium still treated the army of sorceress Astartes with suspicion, and the 1,000 sons of Magnus would need to vindicate themselves from their detractors. Regardless of their small numbers in comparison to their brother legions, the 15th would quickly prove themselves to be more than capable of bringing worlds into compliance.
I'm just curious, are they like all, so as I understand right now, there's like 1,000 of them. Are there all psychers, or many of them just possess some psychic powers without being like they still use, they have psychic powers, but they still use just guns? You know what? I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
Displaying their mastery of the warp in bouts of
This helmet is hacking goofy, and I muted the sound.
arcane might, the 1,000 sons would emulate a fragment of the Emperor's own power during their campaigns. Led by their striking Crimson Lord, the 15th Legion would be among the most noble warriors of the Imperium. Akin to scholars more than warriors, the Astartes of Prospero would delight in their mastery of the Immaterium, enthralling the populations of worlds rather than expunge them with devastation and fire. Such tactics would earn the ire of the Primarch of the 6th Legion, Leman Russ, for their flagrantly dishonorable manipulations of the will of their foes.
Dude, I like Leman Russ, but he strikes me as like such simpleton, you know, in some ways. He's like a simple guy. And that little bit of his arrogance that is probably the main reason why I don't like him. It's like the people who, you know, to put it simple, there are people who see the world one way and they don't realize that there's other ways to do stuff. They only seen one way and never tried anything else, you know? So Leman Russ strikes me as basically the simple guy who, and Magnus strikes me as the guy who tries everything. And maybe I'm full of shit, guys.
Gathering knowledge from every corner of the galaxy, the Crimson King would pen a tome enriched with knowledge and arcanum of the warp, the Book of Magnus.
No.
Fastened to Magnus's armor in heavy golden chains, the book wrapped in the hide of a slain Psychnuin would be for the eyes of the Crimson King alone. Breaching the Eldar webway with his scavenged knowledge, Magnus would ever further infringe upon the boundaries outlined by the Emperor.
Oh.
The 1,000 Sons' obsession with claiming knowledge from conquered worlds would sow distrust among the Primarchs and their legions, for the 15th could not be trusted in indulging in knowledge in breach of the Imperial truth. Raising their concerns to the Master of Mankind, the Space Wolves, Death Guard, Imperial Fists, and Raven Guard would demand reprisal for the 1,000 Sons' abuse of sorcery. Convening the Council of Nicaea, the Emperor would decide the fate of the Librarius within the legions and be swayed by the council of both Primarchs and Astartes invested in its cause. Magnus would champion the use of psychers within the legions, and despite a rousing speech before the assembled conclave, his opposition would be vicious. The Primarch of the Death Guard, Mortarion, and representative of the Space Wolves, Ophir Weirdmake, would testify.
I understand Mortarion because from the video he was in the Necromancer Wars. I don't really understand why would Space Wolves be so against the sorcery. Again, Felix, they're just simple-minded. They prefer like the old-fashioned way, taking an axe and beat the shit out of each other.
Fraught dangers of the warp and sway the Emperor's decision. Outlawing the Librarius, the Master of Mankind would censure all use of Psykers among the Legiones Astartes, a decision which would cement the Thousand Sons' destiny of betrayal. Infuriated with the Emperor's prohibition in the use of Psykers, Magnus would seek a means to circumvent such a ruling. With the Orc menace routed during the decisive Battle of Ulanor, the Emperor would install his most cherished son, Horus Lupercal, to lead the Great Crusade in his absence.
So if Psykers are outlawed, how does Thousand Sons function? Do they just become regular Space Marines and that's it? That's like unfair, that's unfair at all.
Returning to Holy Terra, the Master of Mankind would in secret attempt to claim the Eldar Webway for the Imperium's use in safe traversal of the galaxy in the stead of warp travel.
You know, that's also confused. In Bricky video, he said the Emperor was making some new way of transfer between worlds, and here Remembrancer says the Emperor was trying to make Elder Webway to be available, used by all human factions. So was it Elder Webway or was it something completely different?
Magnus would seek solace upon his homeworld of Prospero, and seek a means to divine a future in which his legion would once again be free to harness their mastery of the Immaterium. Within his long meditations, Magnus would foresee a great ruination poised to sunder the Imperium. Horus Lupercal would turn against his father and plunge the galaxy into a war which would damn humanity to a future of endless war, suffering, and ignorance. Unable to divine his own future, and revealing that the War Master had already begun his corruption in the service to the ruinous powers, the Crimson King would in an act of desperation bring ruin to the future of humanity.
Oh no.
With the aid of his legion's greatest sorcerers, Magnus would attempt to contact the Emperor within his psychically fortified palace. Projecting himself to Holy Terra, Magnus would be prevented from contacting his father by a barrier constructed to keep out immaterial incursions. Accepting an offer of aid from an unknown entity within the warp to aid in his breach of the barrier, Magnus would naively accept the power of the Changer of Ways.
Wait, so it's a second time. The first time he asked for a cure. Now the second time he is asking to breach the barrier.
In the venture to tear through the psychic barrier. Bursting through the Emperor's throne room, Magnus's actions would allow for the tide of malevolent warp beings to spill through the tear in the palace's defenses, corrupting the—
Oh shit, so basically it worked, but also warp demons started to appear in the palace. I didn't know that part. I just thought it was just Magnus.
Webway. Beyond all hope of salvation, the Crimson King had damned humanity to forever suffer void travel within the malevolent tide.
Oh, and also because of it, he ruined the Emperor's work. Oh my god. Basically, Emperor's experiment completely nulled.
Of the warp.
Oh my god.
Furious that his great work had been ruined, the Emperor would demand that Magnus face trial for his actions. Dispatching the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, under the command of their Primarch, Leman Russ, the Emperor would order the Vilca Fenrica to bring Magnus to Terra. As Magnus's spirit returned to his mortal shell.
But is it really Magnus' fault? That all, if only he knew what Emperor was doing, all of it could have been prevented. Does that make sense? So now I get why everyone is saying very sympathetic to Magnus. I don't know. It's very hard for me to say. I don't think he's guilty, but I don't think he's innocent.
He would be visited by the architect of fate, Sinch.
Zinch.
Taunting the Crimson King that he shall serve as his champion, Magnus had failed to warn the Emperor of Horus's impending betrayal and doomed humanity to forever be cursed by the machinations of the warp. As the Space Wolves neared ever closer to Prospero, the War Master would intercept their transmission and, under the guise of loyalty to the Emperor, give new orders to the rout. Ordered to destroy the Thousand Suns with his detachment of Sisters of Silence and Legio Custodes, the Wolf King would have no reason to doubt the fealty of his trusted brother and accept his command. The Space Wolves would descend upon Prospero and burn its once beautiful vistas to ash. Magnus now understood that he had been manipulated by the powers of the warp, which he had time and again been warned to abstain.
So, okay, so Magnus realized his mistakes. And I guess the price for his mistake is the trial that awaits him, and that his city that he basically built is being destroyed. There's probably a little genocide sprinkled in there somewhere, but I still think he can redeem himself. So what happened next?
Deciding to sacrifice himself and his sons to deny the ruinous powers their prize, Magnus would no longer be a pawn of chaos. Allowing his homeworld to be razed to the ground, Magnus would hide the Sixth Legion's fleet from his men to hasten the demise of his people. Death reigned upon Tizca as the rout and their allies cut a sway through the streets of the once proud.
Is that Sister of Silence? Also, another question, would technically Thousand Suns are like psychers, so wouldn't that make it extremely easy just to send the Sisters of Silence against them? Or it doesn't work like that?
City of Light. Unable to accept responsibility for his actions, Magnus would not be capable of holding true to his own resolve and aid in his homeworld's defense. Confronting his brother, Leman Russ, Magnus would battle the Wolf King in single combat. Protected with runic armor and the combined null power of the Sisters of Silence, Leman Russ would face the Crimson King in a duel of steel alone. Shattering Russ's armor with a mighty punch of his fist, Magnus would further puncture one of the Wolf King's hearts.
Oh.
Yet such a strike had been a ruse, for Leman would blind Magnus, and after lifting the Crimson King across his knee, break the Primarch's spine.
Oh my god.
The Crimson King had fallen. His men had been slaughtered under his protection, and now his homeworld burned. Losing all hope of salvation or redemption, Magnus would surrender to the ruinous powers. Offering his fealty to the Changer of Ways, Magnus would pledge his soul to the being known as Sinch. By the will of the Lord of Change, the City of Light would be teleported to within the Eye of Terror. Upon a demon world of the Architect of Fate's choosing, Magnus would accept his bargain as a servant of the ruinous powers. Transforming into a demon prince of his patron, Magnus had relinquished his mortal form, which would shatter into fragments to ascend into a corporeal being.
Oh my.
As the shards of Magnus were cast across the galaxy, each piece of the Crimson King's power would appear as mental projections to those whom sought his counsel. His primary form would remain on the demon planet of the sorcerers within the Immaterium, yet would deteriorate with the absent shards of his being. The Thousand Suns' first captain, Arzek Araman, would venture forth to retrieve the shards of Magnus. Obtaining all but one of the missing fragments, Araman would restore much of his Gene Father's power with the 4 reclaimed shards of his being. Bereft of the final shard, characterized by his humanity and good nature, Magnus would return to real space with his Thousand Suns to aid in the traitor war effort. Seeking out...
It's not the same, that's it. It's over for Magnus. At this point, it's no more redemption.
The final shard of his being on Holy Terror, the Crimson King would ally with the War Master by necessity alone.
I feel like all this Horus Heresy thing is such a fucking big misunderstanding, you know? It's like, You just wish it went different, but if everything went different, none of it would happen, so we wouldn't be here.
Joining the
Damn.
traitors at the muster point of Ulanor, Magnus and his remaining 1,000 sons would journey to Holy Terra. Absent from the battlefield, Magnus would orchestrate strategies aboard Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, for the traitors to breach the psychic barriers surrounding the Imperial Palace. Yet with the fall of the Lionsgate spaceport, Magnus would take to the field. Weakening the Emperor's psychic might and aiding his brother Mortarion, the Crimson King would bolster the traitors' assault before the great culmination of the war. As Mortarion and his Death Guard resumed their assault of the Imperial defenders, Magnus and his 1,000 sons would infiltrate the Imperial dungeons. Entering the
Oh, I didn't know we had a dungeon, but I guess it makes sense.
Imperial Palace, Magnus would be confronted by Malkador the Sigillite and be informed that the final shard of Magnus was now beyond his reach.
Isn't this guy like the Emperor's friend? Like,
Imbued within the reborn last son of Prospero, Revular Vida, Magnus would never be whole again. Seemingly slaying the Sigillite, Magnus's fury would not be satisfied. Entering the chamber of the Golden Throne, the Emperor would sit immobile and vulnerable. Aiming a psychic projectile to kill the Master of Mankind, Magnus's strike would be repelled by the Primarch of the 18th Legion, Vulcan. Denied his vengeance, Magnus and his 1,000 sons would battle the Salamanders and their Gene Father. However, during the fray, the Emperor would show Magnus a vision of a possible future. Magnus sat upon the Golden Throne, blissfully drifting into the tides of the warp and its mysteries alongside his father. Powering the Imperial Webway, this vision of Magnus would guard the Imperium as the foundation for its dominion of the stars and long-reigning peace achieved by the Emperor.
oh my god, so you're telling me the throne was made for Magnus? Oh my word.
The loyal Primarchs now presided over humanity in its hard-won age of prosperity, peace, and unending grandeur. Offering Magnus a chance to rejoin the fold of the Loyalists, the Emperor would claim that such a perfect future could still be achieved.
But, okay. Now, why wouldn't Magnus join? Is it because now he's mad that Space Wolves for burning his planet?
Magnus had only to turn from the clutches of chaos and accept that his 1,000 sons could never be freed from the curse of the flesh change. Refusing his father's offer, Magnus would continue his attempt to end the...
But why? What's the reasoning for his decline of the offer?
Emperor's life. Pummeled into submission by the Lord of Drakes, Magnus would once again...
Dude, Magnus' fucking armor looks so good. This fucking... How are they salamanders? Is this like salamander skull looks so good?
surrender the last shred of his soul to transcend fully into a being of the Immaterium. Banished by the anti-demonic wards of the chamber, the Crimson King would transform into a winged demonic entity. Once more clashing with Vulcan within the Imperial Webway, Magnus would attempt to sway the loyal son of the Emperor, yet fail in his manipulations. Slaying the Perpetual Primarch several times during their duel, Vulcan would...
Perpetual means he can die, basically, even if you, like, kill him in quotes, he still can basically return.
not relent and be given new life with each mortal blow. Besting Magnus with sheer brute force and indomitable attrition, Vulcan would, before disintegrating from a final desperate blast of psychic energy, crush Magnus's skull with his Warhammer, Urdracule.
Warhammer.
With the Emperor's victory against the traitors to the throne, the pawns of chaos would retreat from Holy Terra. Fleeing to the planet of the sorcerers, the surviving 1,000 sons would, for their defeat, once more be afflicted with the curse of the flesh change. First Captain Arzek Araman would attempt to conjure a fell incantation to revoke the curse of his legion, yet further damn the 1,000 sons by transforming the psychically lacking members of the 15th into mindless automatons.
Oh,
those
so
who
they're
prove
like
worthy would be
Necrons?
empowered and assume command
Like they're like just like automatons.
of the so-called Rubric Marines, and further fracture the 15th Legion.
Okay.
Magnus, now reformed from his banishment into the Warp, would grieve for the loss of more of his beloved sons by the careless meddling of sorcery. Seeking to punish his wayward son, Magnus would confront Ahriman upon the planet of sorcerers and demand blood for his callous actions. Yet Tzeentch would intervene and spare the life of the Sorcerer Lord. Banishing his first captain and ordering him to fulfill a quest to understand the Warp to its full extent, Ahriman's actions had torn asunder the Legion into conflicting warbands. But despite the Thousand Sons' continual burdens, the Crimson King would rally those who remained loyal to his cause and seek penance for the loss of his homeworld. Emerging from the Immaterium during the 32nd millennium, Magnus would orchestrate the devastation of worlds throughout Imperial space. Hunted by the Great Wolf of the 6th Legion, Harek Ironhelm, the Thousand Sons would evade the Space Wolf's persecution and assault their homeworld of Fenris.
It's like he can't escape those dummies.
Despising the Sons of Russ for their chapter's past actions, Magnus would seek to raise Fenris in the manner of his own homeworld. Sieging the Space Wolves' fortress known by outsiders as the Fang, the 6th Legion would endure the assault of the Thousand Sons for 40 days. Awoken from his long slumber, the ancient venerable dreadnought, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, would lead his chapter on their survival of the invasion of the
Oh, so in this, like, their captain is like a dreadnought. That's cool.
Crimson King, whilst the scout marines of the chapter would be dispatched to bring word of the assault to Harek Ironhelm. With the return of the Great Wolf, the Thousand Sons would be repelled. Wounding the Primarch of the 15th, Harek would manage a valiant defiance against the Primarch, yet die during their brutal engagement. Yet the Ayat would stand, and with the reinforcement of Harek's men, the Thousand Sons would be driven from Fenris. Satisfied with destroying the gene stores of the Rout, Magnus would continue his plots to destroy the legacy of Leman Russ. Returning to real space during the 41st millennium, Magnus would attempt to retrieve the holy relic of the chapter, the Spear of Russ. The Dionysian Spear would enable Magnus to revive his fallen sons, yet with the intervention of Ragnar Blackmane, such heretical rituals would be thwarted. Obsessed with the destruction...
Dude, I'm at the point where I'm just trying to root for Magnus so he could win anything, and oh my god.
Of his most hated nemesis, Magnus would return once again during 999.M41 and enact the Siege of Fenris. Once more banished by the Great Wolf, Logan Grimnar, Magnus's relentless conquest of the Fenrisians would bear...
You see, which is so insane. I didn't realize it. He's on a boat, dragged by wolves. What the fuck?
a heavy toll on the 6th Legion. Yet despite his greatest efforts, the sons of Leman Russ would endure and stand ever vigilant to face the Crimson King's campaigns. With Magnus's emboldening by humbling the wolves of Fenris, he would soon find another foe to bring to heel. The Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rebute Gilliman, had returned to the faltering Imperium and begun his task of avenging the lost glory of humanity.
Yeah, this is where we get Space Marine 1 and Space Marine 2. And probably that Space Marine game both gone.
During the Avenging Sons' Terran crusade to return to the Throne World, Magnus would ambush his brother's fleet. Trapping Gilliman within the Maelstrom, the Primarch of the Ultramarines would regardless manage to escape the clutches of the Thousand Sons and would confront his once brother upon the moon of Luna. Dueling the Lord of Ultramar, Magnus would overwhelm the Primarch of the 13th and seem poised to end the resurgence of the Emperor's solitary beacon of hope. Though Gilliman would not die this day, and with the aid of the Sisters of Silence, the Avenging...
Oh yeah, Sister of Silence. Fucking... Oof.
Sun would impale the Crimson King with the Emperor's divine blade and banish Magnus once more into the Immaterium. Though Magnus remains a tireless thorn in humanity's side. relentless in his quest to one day crush the Imperium and seek retribution.
Here I am in the flesh, and somehow, there you are.
Magnus cocked his head to one side and smirked.
I don't remember you seeming so insignificant.
Damn.
10 millennia have made you no less arrogant then,
asked Guilliman, warily circling his towering foe. Inside his helm, a look of disgust twisted his patrician features as he regarded the monstrous form of the Crimson King.
Certainly, those years have done you no other kindness.
Magnus laughed.
How could you have such grand plans, and yet such scant vision has always eluded me?
This, the Demon Primarch said, empiric energy stirring as they gathered around his leveled glaive,
is what a true power looks like. I see no power here,
said Guilliman, shaking his head in dismay.
I see corruption and enslavement to monsters that are worshipped as gods. On that, Rabute,
Magnus laughed, sparing a glance at the loyalist fighting nearby.
Perhaps we can finally agree.
Damn.
This has been a tale of the great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer.
Thank you, Remembrancer.
The Primarch of the 15th Legion would be brought low for his lack of restraint in his pursuit of knowledge and power. While Magnus would be among the mightiest of Primarchs, he would nonetheless be brought low by pride. For in my next transmission of the Traitor Primarchs, we shall elucidate the Primarch once championed by both the Emperor and the Ruinous Powers. The War Master of Chaos, Horus Lupercal.
Yeah, I checked, and yeah, the next one is definitely going to be Horus, so I'm kind of excited about that. But Horus is in the next one. Let's talk about Magnus. He's again same problem as Mortarion, I'd say. If I would have to put him into my top Primarch list, I wouldn't put him even in the top 10. Few moments were insane with him. He was basically cheated by Zinch twice. The fact that the Emperor has still given him an opportunity to redeem himself, but I guess he didn't want to sacrifice all of his sons again. I see why he wouldn't want to, sit on the throne and become a beacon of hope for humanity, but an interesting guy. There's the fact that everyone was also against his legion, and the fact that he lost the debate basically, and they sanctioned his legion specifically because he was having 2 psychic powers. I understand why he would want to join Chaos, Yeah. An interesting guy. Thank you for listening again to my ramblings. If you liked my reaction, please leave a like. If you wanna see more, you can sub. I try to upload Mondays and Thursdays. And see you in the next one, guys. Ciao, cacao.